The ultrasound photos slipped from my fingers when I saw them through the hospital window. Derek, my boyfriend of 4 years, pressing his lips against her mouth in the parking lot. Dr. Morrison's voice faded into static as I watched him cup her face. The same hands that had held mine just yesterday when we saw our daughter's heartbeat for the first time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Ms. Hart, Victoria, are you listening? Dr. Morrison's concern barely registered. I was 8 months pregnant. My ankles were swollen. My back ached constantly. And the father of my child was kissing another woman 50 feet from where I sat receiving our baby's health report. I need to go, I whispered, gathering my things with trembling hands. The November air bit through my coat as I pushed through the hospital doors. They were gone. The parking space where his silver Audi had been sitting empty, mocking me. I stood there, one hand pressed against my rounded belly, the other clutching the ultrasound images that suddenly felt like evidence rather than celebration. My phone buzzed. Derek's name lit up the screen. Sorry, babe. Emergency at the office. We'll make dinner up to you tomorrow. Love you. Emergency. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. I'd watched his emergency wrap her arms around his neck. Watched him smile in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months. Watched him look at her the way he used to look at me before I got pregnant. Before my body changed. Before I became inconvenient. I drove home in silence, my mind spinning through the past few months with new clarity. The late nights at the office. The phone calls he'd taken in another room. The way he'd stopped touching me, claiming he was afraid of hurting the baby. The business trips that seemed to multiply as my due date approached. Our apartment, my apartment, I corrected myself, since my name was the only one on the lease, felt suffocatingly empty. I'd decorated the nursery myself over the past weeks while Derek claimed he was too busy with work. The pale yellow walls, the hand-painted clouds, the carefully assembled crib. All of it suddenly seemed like a monument to my own foolishness. I sank onto the couch and opened my laptop. The law firm's email was still pulled up from this morning. Bennett and Associates, one of the most prestigious criminal defense firms in the state. My employer for the past 6 years. The place where I'd built my reputation as a ruthless investigator. The person they called when they needed dirt on witnesses, when they needed to crack open alibis, when they needed someone who could find the truth buried under layers of lies. Ironic, I thought bitterly, that I'd been so blind to the lies in my own life. My phone rang again. This time it was my assistant, Jamie. Victoria, I have those financial records you requested for the Morrison case, she said. But there's something else. You asked me to keep an ear out for anything unusual at Sterling Investment Group? I sat up straighter. Sterling Investment Group. Derek's employer. Or rather, the company where Derek worked as a senior financial analyst. A company I'd been quietly investigating for the past 2 months after noticing some irregularities in documents that had crossed my desk during an unrelated case. What did you find? There's been unusual movement in several offshore accounts. Large transfers, all routed through shell companies. The pattern matches what we saw in the Castellano fraud case last year. Jamie paused. Victoria, some of these transactions have Derek's digital signature. My hand instinctively moved to my belly, feeling my daughter kick as if responding to the spike in my heart rate. Send me everything. And Jamie, not a word to anyone. Of course. Are you okay? You sound... I'm fine. Just send the files. I wasn't fine. I was 8 months pregnant, apparently being cheated on, and now discovering that my child's father might be involved in financial crimes. The combination should have devastated me. Instead, I felt something else clicking into place. A cold, sharp focus I recognized from my work, the moment when disparate pieces of information began forming a pattern. The files arrived within minutes. I spent the next 3 hours cross-referencing bank statements, transaction records, and corporate filings. Derek had been careful, but not careful enough. Money was flowing from Sterling's client accounts into a network of offshore holdings, then being redistributed through carefully layered transfers. Embezzlement, most likely. Possibly money laundering. The amounts were staggering. Over $15 million across 18 months. And Derek's fingerprints were all over it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My phone buzzed with a text from him. Still at the office? Going to be another late one. Don't wait up. I stared at the message, then at the evidence scattered across my screen. A plan was forming, something cold and calculated. Something that would have frightened me if I'd stopped to think about it. But I didn't stop. I couldn't afford to. I opened a new document and began typing. Names, dates, account numbers, transaction patterns. Everything I'd found, organized with the same meticulous attention I brought to building cases for my firm. But this wasn't for a client. This was personal. Around midnight, I heard Derek's key in the lock. I closed my laptop and arranged myself on the couch, playing the part of the tired, pregnant girlfriend waiting up for her man. "Hey, you're still awake." He looked surprised, and was that guilt flickering across his face? "You should be sleeping." "Couldn't get comfortable," I said, which was true. 8 months pregnant left few comfortable positions. "How was work?" "Exhausting." He loosened his tie, a Hermes tie I'd bought him for his birthday. "The Johnson account is killing us. Might need to go to Boston next week to smooth things over." Boston, where she lived, according to the social media deep dive I'd conducted during hour 2 of my investigation. Her name was Rachel Chen, a marketing executive he'd met at a conference 6 months ago. 6 months. Right around the time I'd started showing. "That's a lot of travel so close to my due date," I said carefully. Derek's expression flickered with something that might have been irritation. "It's my job, Victoria. Someone has to pay the bills, especially with the baby coming." The baby. Not our daughter. Not Sophia, the name we'd supposedly agreed on together. Just the baby. As if she were a financial obligation rather than a child. "Of course," I murmured, keeping my voice soft, compliant. "I understand." He kissed my forehead, a brotherly peck, nothing more, and headed to the bedroom. I waited until I heard the shower running before opening my laptop again. The next morning I called in sick to work. It wasn't entirely a lie. Pregnancy insomnia and stress had left me genuinely exhausted. But more importantly, I needed time to work without interruption. I started with Rachel Chen. Social media gave me the surface. Beautiful, successful, recently divorced. But I needed more. Using resources I'd cultivated over years of investigative work, I dug deeper. Credit reports, property records, professional history. And there, buried in the financial data, I found it. A joint bank account opened 3 months ago. Derek Hart and Rachel Chen. The account that received regular deposits from one of the offshore companies I'd identified the night before. They weren't just having an affair. They were partners. In the crime in the deception, in the systematic theft of millions of dollars from Sterling Investment Group. My daughter kicked hard against my ribs, as if protesting the betrayal of her father. I placed my hand over the spot, feeling her move beneath my palm. "It's okay, baby girl," I whispered. "Mama's going to fix this." I spent the rest of the day building my case. Every transaction traced and documented. Every communication between Derek and Rachel extracted from phone records I probably shouldn't have been able to access. Every piece of evidence organized, cross-referenced, and verified. By evening, I had enough to bury him. Enough to send him to prison for decades. But I didn't move yet. I needed timing. I needed leverage. I needed to understand the full scope of what he'd done before I struck. Derek came home late again, smelling of perfume I didn't wear. He barely looked at me as he grabbed a beer from the fridge. "I need to talk to you about something," he said, and my heart rate spiked. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. "Okay," I said, lowering myself carefully into a chair, one hand protectively over my belly. He didn't sit. He stood by the counter, beer in hand, not meeting my eyes. "This isn't easy to say. I've been thinking a lot about us, about the baby, about what I want from life." "And?" My voice was steady. Inside, I was cataloging every word, every gesture, adding them to the evidence file building in my mind. "I don't think I'm ready for this. For fatherhood. For being tied down. I'm only 32, Victoria. I have my whole life ahead of me." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. "You have your whole life ahead of you," I repeated slowly. "And what about me? What about your daughter?" "You'll be fine," he said, and the dismissiveness in his tone was like a slap. "You have a good job. Your family will help. And I'll pay child support, obviously. I'm not trying to abandon my responsibilities." "How generous of you." The sarcasm slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes narrowed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We both know this hasn't been working for a while. The pregnancy just made it more obvious." "When?" I asked. "When did you decide this?" "Does it matter?" "Yes." I stood up, using the table for support, meeting his eyes directly. "Yes, Derek, it matters. It matters when the father of my child decided he didn't want to be a father anymore." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. "A few months ago, honestly, around the time you started showing. It just made everything feel too real, too fast. Around the time he met Rachel, around the time he started stealing from his company, around the time he began building a new life that didn't include me or our daughter." "I see," I said quietly. "And what's her name?" He froze. "What?" "The woman you're leaving me for. What's her name?" There's no one else, Victoria. This is about us, about me not being ready for Derek." I cut him off, my voice sharp enough to make him flinch. "I saw you, yesterday, at the hospital, in the parking lot." The color drained from his face. For a moment, we stood in silence, the truth hanging between us like a guillotine blade. "It's not what you think," he finally said, the oldest, most worthless excuse in the book. "Really? Then what is it?" "Because what I think is that you've been cheating on me while I'm pregnant with your child. What I think is that you're a coward who can't even own his own betrayal." His expression hardened. "You know what? Fine. Yes, I met someone who actually wants the same things I want. Someone who isn't constantly tired or hormonal or..." "Get out." "What?" "Get out of my apartment. Now." "Victoria, come on. We can talk about this like adults. Figure out the logistics, the custody arrangement. We'll figure out everything through lawyers. Get out." Something in my tone must have convinced him I was serious. He grabbed his keys and wallet, heading for the door. Then he stopped, turned back. "I'll come by this weekend to get my things." "No, you won't. I'll have everything packed and waiting in the building's storage unit. You can collect it from there." "You can't just—" "I can, and I will. This is my apartment, Derek. My name on the lease, my furniture, my home. You're just someone who stayed here." He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Maybe he was. For 4 years, I'd been gentle, accommodating, supportive. I'd shaped myself around his needs, his career, his ambitions. He'd never seen the woman who built criminal cases for a living, who knew how to dismantle lives with documentation and evidence. He was about to learn. After he left, I sat in the silence of my apartment, feeling my daughter move beneath my hands. The ultrasound photo from yesterday was still on the coffee table. I picked it up, studying the grainy image of her perfect profile. "Just you and me, baby girl," I whispered. "And I promise you, your father is going to regret every single choice he made." I opened my laptop and began drafting the first email. It went to Robert Sterling, CEO of Sterling Investment Group. We'd met at a charity function 2 years ago, and he'd given me his card, insisting I'd call if I ever needed anything. The email was brief, professional, and devastating. "Mr. Sterling, I've uncovered evidence of significant financial irregularities involving one of your senior analysts, Derek Hart. The enclosed documentation suggests systematic embezzlement and money laundering. I believe this requires immediate attention. I'm available to discuss further at your convenience. Victoria Hart, Senior Investigator, Bennett and Associates." I attached a carefully curated selection of the evidence, enough to be alarming, not enough to show my full hand. The second email went to my boss, Thomas Bennett. I'd worked for him long enough to know he appreciated initiative and hated being blindsided. I explained the situation clinically. I'd discovered evidence of financial crimes involving my former partner. I'd gathered preliminary documentation, and I was offering to recuse myself if there was any conflict of interest. His response came within an hour. "Don't recuse yourself. Nail the bastard." The third email was the most delicate. It went to an old contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, someone I'd worked with on a case 3 years ago. I didn't reveal my personal connection, just presented it as a potential case that had come across my desk. The evidence, I suggested, warranted investigation. By midnight, I'd set 3 separate wheels in motion. Sterling would freeze Derek's access and likely hire Bennett and Associates to investigate, meaning my firm would be paid to build the case I'd already started. The FBI would open a preliminary inquiry, and Derek, walking around free and planning his new life with Rachel, had no idea the walls were already closing in. My phone rang at 2 a.m. I was still awake, unable to sleep, going through documents for the 5th time. "Victoria Hart?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional. "Yes?" "This is Agent Sarah Mitchell from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. I apologize for the late call, but I received your email earlier today. The evidence you've provided is extremely compelling. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss this case in detail." "Of course. What time?" "How about 10 a.m.? There's a coffee shop on Madison and 5th. "I know it. I'll be there." After she hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, listening to the city sounds drifting through the windows. Tomorrow, the machine I'd set in motion would begin to truly move. Derek thought he was free, thought he'd escape the burden of fatherhood, thought he'd start fresh with Rachel and his stolen millions. He had no idea he was already caught. I woke to cramping at 6 a.m. Not contractions. I'd been briefed enough by Dr. Morrison to know the difference, but enough discomfort to remind me that my body was preparing for labor, whether or not my life was ready for it. I dressed carefully in one of the few professional outfits that still fit, applied makeup to hide the sleepless night, and headed out to meet Agent Mitchell. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes that reminded me of myself. We shook hands, and she immediately got down to business. Ms. Hart, I have to be honest. When I received your email, I was skeptical. These kinds of anonymous tips often lead nowhere, but the documentation you provided is exceptional. Whoever compiled this knew exactly what they were doing. I've worked in legal investigation for 6 years, I said. I know what constitutes evidence. You certainly do. She pulled out a tablet, swiping through screens. What you sent was just the beginning, wasn't it? There's more. Substantially more. 18 months of transactions, multiple offshore accounts, 2 primary individuals involved, and evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering. Agent Mitchell leaned forward. Who are you protecting, Ms. Hart? Excuse me? Your email was professional, but it didn't explain how this case came across your desk. Sterling Investment Group isn't your client. This isn't related to any active litigation your firm is handling. So how did you come to possess this information? I'd prepared for this question. The truth, I'd decided, was the best weapon I had. Derek Hart is my former partner, father of my unborn child. He left me 2 days ago for his accomplice, Rachel Chen. I discovered the financial crimes while investigating the affair. Agent Mitchell's expression didn't change, but I saw respect flicker in her eyes. That must have been difficult. What was difficult was realizing I'd been sleeping next to a criminal for 4 years. I pulled out my own tablet, bringing up files. What will be satisfying is watching him go to prison for it. Ms. Hart? Victoria. Victoria, she corrected. I need you to understand something. If we pursue this case, you'll likely be called as a witness. Your personal relationship with the suspect will be examined. Defense attorneys will try to paint this as a revenge plot by a scorned woman. Let them try, I said calmly. The evidence speaks for itself. Every transaction is documented, every transfer traced, every shell company identified. My personal feelings are irrelevant to the facts. She smiled then, a genuine expression of appreciation. I think we're going to work well together. Can you send me everything you have? Already done. Check your secure email. Agent Mitchell's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her eyebrows rose. You work fast. I had motivation. We spent the next 2 hours going through the evidence in detail. I explained the transaction patterns, the timing of the transfers, the connections between the various shell companies. Agent Mitchell took notes, asked pointed questions, and occasionally stopped to make phone calls that clearly set additional investigations in motion. There's enough here for multiple charges, she finally said. Wire fraud, money laundering, embezzlement. If we can tie Rachel Chen directly to the conspiracy, and your evidence suggests we can, she'll face the same charges. Good, I said simply. Victoria. Agent Mitchell's voice softened slightly. I have to ask, are you prepared for what's coming? This won't be quick or easy. Federal investigations take time. The arrest, the trial, the media attention, and you'll be in the middle of it, heavily pregnant or with a newborn. Agent Mitchell, I've spent 6 years building cases. I know exactly what's involved. I met her eyes steadily. And yes, I'm prepared. More than prepared. I'm counting on it. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Need to talk about practical things. When can I pick up my stuff? I showed the message to Agent Mitchell. Should I maintain contact with him? Actually, that would be helpful. The more normal everything seems, the better. We don't want him spooked before we're ready to move. She paused. Can you do that? Act like everything's normal? I thought about the 4 years I'd spent thinking I was building a life with someone who was systematically betraying me. Thought about the months of smiling through his lies and excuses. I can do that, I said. I texted back. Sunday afternoon. I'll have everything ready. His response was immediate. Thanks for being reasonable about this. I know it's hard, but it's better for both of us. Better for both of us. The audacity made my hands clench around my phone. Agent Mitchell noticed. When this is over, he's going to realize what he threw away. When this is over, I corrected, he's going to realize what he stole, and he's going to pay for every penny of it. I spent the weekend boxing up Derek's belongings with a level of care I didn't feel. Every item was cataloged, photographed, and documented, not because I cared about his possessions, but because I wanted no loose ends, no excuses, no way for him to claim I'd destroyed or stolen anything. Sunday afternoon arrived with perfect weather, sunny, mild, the kind of day that promised new beginnings. Derek showed up with Rachel. He actually brought her to collect his things from my apartment. Victoria, this is Rachel, he said, as if introducing me to a work colleague. She's helping me move. Rachel had the grace to look uncomfortable. She was beautiful, objectively, professionally beautiful in the way of someone who'd learned to weaponize their appearance. But there was something brittle in her smile, something calculating in the way she assessed me and my swollen belly. Nice to meet you, she said, the lie obvious in her voice. Wish I could say the same. I didn't bother hiding my contempt. Everything's in the storage unit. Building manager has the key. We can get it ourselves, Derek said quickly, clearly eager to leave. Fine. Sign this. I handed him a document I'd prepared, a simple acknowledgement that he'd collected all his belongings and had no further claim to anything in the apartment. He barely glanced at it before signing. Rachel, I noticed, read it more carefully before nodding to Derek. They left within 10 minutes, loading boxes into a Mercedes I didn't recognize. Rachel's car, I assumed. Bought with stolen money, driven by people who thought they were free. I watched from my window as they drove away, then called Agent Mitchell. They just left together. Rachel Chen was with him. Perfect. We actually needed confirmation they were still in regular contact. Thank you, Victoria. How much longer? The investigation is moving faster than expected, thanks to your documentation. I'd estimate another 2 to 3 weeks before we have everything we need for arrest warrants. 2 to 3 weeks. My due date was in 3 weeks. Agent Mitchell, I need this to happen before I go into labor. We're working as fast as we can, but no. My voice was sharp. I need to be there when he's arrested. I need to see his face when he realizes what's happening. After the baby comes, I won't be able to. So it needs to happen before. Silence on the line. Then, I'll see what I can do. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation, both for my daughter's arrival and for Derek's downfall. I attended birthing classes alone, fielding sympathetic looks from other couples. I finished setting up the nursery. I packed my hospital bag. And every spare moment, I spent refining the evidence, finding new connections, building an unbreakable case. Dr. Morrison noticed the stress at my 38-week appointment. "Your blood pressure is elevated," she said with concern. "Victoria, I know you're dealing with a difficult personal situation, but you need to take care of yourself. Stress isn't good for the baby." "I'm fine," I assured her. "Just tying up some loose ends before she arrives." "Loose ends can wait. Your daughter can't." She gave me a stern look. "I want to see you again in 3 days. If your blood pressure hasn't improved, we may need to discuss inducing labor early." 3 days later, my blood pressure was worse. Dr. Morrison made the decision to induce the following week, just shy of 39 weeks. "I don't like your numbers," she said. "The baby is fully developed, and the risk of continuing the pregnancy outweighs the benefits." I called Agent Mitchell immediately after leaving the doctor's office. "I'm being induced on Friday," I said without preamble. "That gives you 6 days." "Victoria?" "6 days, Agent Mitchell. After that, I'll have a newborn, and I won't be able to do what needs to be done. So whatever you need from me, whatever final pieces you're missing, we have 6 days to make this happen." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can you come to the field office tomorrow? There are some documents we need you to review, some testimony we need to finalize. If we push hard, we might be able to move the timeline up." "I'll be there." The FBI field office was in downtown Chicago, a fortress of glass and steel that seemed designed to intimidate. Agent Mitchell met me in the lobby, guiding me through security and up to a conference room where 3 other agents waited. "Victoria Hart, this is Agent James Rodriguez, Agent Lisa Chen, and Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Thompson." The AUS attorney stood, extending his hand. "Ms. Hart, your work on this case has been remarkable. Agent Mitchell tells me you've been instrumental in building our case against Derek Hart and Rachel Chen." "I provided documentation," I said. "The crimes are theirs." "Humble and accurate," Thompson said with a slight smile. "We'd like to go through your evidence in detail, prepare you for potential testimony, and discuss timeline. This won't be quick. We're looking at several hours. Are you up for that?" I was 8 months pregnant with swollen ankles and constant back pain. I was up for anything that ended with Derek behind bars. "Let's begin," I said. We worked through lunch and into the evening. Every transaction examined, every connection verified, every piece of evidence cross-checked and validated. The AUS attorney was thorough, almost painfully so, but I appreciated it. This case needed to be bulletproof. The total amount stolen appears to be approximately $18 million, Thompson finally said, leaning back in his chair. "Transferred across 14 months through 6 shell companies into offshore accounts jointly held by Hart and Chen. This is textbook money laundering with a sophisticated conspiracy to commit fraud." "Can you make the charges stick?" I asked directly. "With this evidence? Absolutely. We're looking at multiple counts of wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and theft from an interstate commerce facility. Combined, we're talking about potential sentences of 20 to 30 years. 20 to 30 years. Derek would be in his 50s when he got out. If he got out." "When?" I asked. Thompson exchanged glances with Agent Mitchell. "We can have arrest warrants by Wednesday. Execute them Thursday morning." Thursday, 2 days before my scheduled induction. "I want to be there," I said. "That's not," Agent Rodriguez began. "I want to be there," I repeated more firmly. "Not at the arrest itself, but immediately after. I want him to see me. I want him to know that I'm the reason his life is over." Thompson studied me for a long moment. Ms. Hart, I understand your desire for closure, but this isn't about closure, Mr. Thompson. This is about justice. Derek Hart stole $18 million. He betrayed his company, his colleagues, and his family. He abandoned his pregnant girlfriend to run off with his accomplice. And he did it all while thinking he was smarter than everyone around him. I leaned forward, my hands on the conference table. I want him to see me walk into that interrogation room. I want him to realize that the hormonal, unemployable woman he dismissed so easily is the one who destroyed him. Not for revenge, for justice. Silence filled the room. Then Thompson nodded slowly. Agent Mitchell will arrange it. I left the FBI building as the sun was setting, painting Chicago's skyline in shades of gold and crimson. My daughter was moving, her kick strong and insistent, as if she knew something important was happening. 2 more days, baby girl, I whispered, one hand on my belly. 2 more days, and then we can focus on just being us. Wednesday passed in a strange state of suspended animation. I finalized everything for the hospital. Bags packed, emergency contacts updated, instructions for Jamie to handle my cases while I was on leave. I cleaned my apartment with an energy I didn't know I still possessed. I even baked cookies, a nervous habit from childhood. My phone rang at 8 p.m. Agent Mitchell. Warrants are signed, she said. We execute tomorrow at 6 a.m. simultaneously at Hart's residence and Chen's apartment. Sterling Investment Group has been briefed. Your firm has been retained to handle the civil case. Everything is in place. Where should I be? Come to the field office at 9 a.m. By then, they'll both be in custody and we'll be starting interrogations. You can observe through the one-way glass if you'd like. I'd like very much. That night, I barely slept. Not from pregnancy discomfort, though there was plenty of that. From anticipation. From the knowledge that tomorrow, everything would change. I was at the FBI building by 8:45 a.m., dressed in the most professional outfit I could manage at 8 months pregnant. Agent Mitchell met me with coffee, decaf, she'd remembered, and a cautious expression. They're both in custody, she said. Hart was arrested at his residence, Chen at her apartment. Both were completely blindsided. Neither has requested a lawyer yet, which is working in our favor. Can I see him? She led me down a corridor to a small observation room. Through the one-way glass, I could see Derek sitting at a metal table, still in the expensive pajamas I'd bought him last Christmas. His hair was disheveled, his face pale with shock. Agent Rodriguez was in the room with him, laying out documents across the table. Mr. Hart, we have evidence of systematic theft from Sterling Investment Group over a 14-month period. $18 million transferred through shell companies into offshore accounts jointly held with Rachel Chen. We have your digital signatures on transfer authorizations. We have email communications discussing the scheme. We have bank records showing deposits into accounts you control. Derek's face had gone from pale to gray. I want a lawyer. That's your right, Rodriguez said calmly. But before your lawyer arrives, you should know something. This investigation was initiated by someone you know very well. Derek's eyes narrowed with confusion. Victoria Hart provided the initial evidence that led to this investigation. Your pregnant ex-girlfriend, the one you left last month, she's the one who discovered what you and Ms. Chen were doing. She's the one who compiled the evidence. She's the senior investigator at Bennett and Associates, Derek, the firm your company just hired to handle the civil case against you. I watched Derek's face transform through a spectrum of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, dawning horror. "Victoria?" he whispered. "Victoria did this?" "She did," Rodriguez confirmed. "And her evidence is ironclad. You're looking at multiple federal charges, potentially 30 years in prison, all because you underestimated the woman carrying your child." Agent Mitchell touched my arm gently. "Are you okay?" I realized I was crying, but not from sadness, from relief, from vindication, from the sheer overwhelming satisfaction of watching Derek realize what he had lost. "I'm perfect," I said. The door to the interrogation room opened, and Agent Mitchell turned to me with a question in her eyes. "Do you want to go in? Rodriguez can bring you in to provide additional context for the evidence." My daughter kicked hard, as if voting yes. "Let's do it," I said. Agent Mitchell spoke quickly into her radio, coordinating with Rodriguez. Moments later, Rodriguez stepped out of the interrogation room. "He's asking for you," Rodriguez said, looking at me with something like sympathy. "Says he wants to talk to you before his lawyer arrives. Keeps saying this must be some kind of mistake, that you'd never do this to him." The delusion was almost beautiful in its completeness. "Let me talk to him," I said. Agent Mitchell hesitated. "Are you sure? There's no requirement for you to face him." "I'm sure." They briefed me quickly. "Stay calm. Don't admit to anything illegal in how I gathered evidence. Remember that everything was being recorded." I nodded through it all, my focus entirely on the man visible through the glass. Rodriguez opened the door for me. I walked into the interrogation room, heavily pregnant, professionally dressed, completely in control. Derek's face when he saw me was everything I'd imagined and more. "Victoria," he breathed. "Thank God. Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them you couldn't have." "I did," I said calmly, taking the seat across from him. Agent Rodriguez remained standing by the door. "I discovered what you and Rachel were doing. I documented every transaction. I traced every account. I built an ironclad case against you, and I handed it to the FBI." His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. "But why? I know I hurt you, but this is $18 million, Derek." My voice was cold, clinical. "You stole $18 million from your employer. You engaged in conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering. You betrayed every person who trusted you. And you did it while I was pregnant with your child, while you were pretending to be a decent person." "I was going to pay child support," he said desperately, as if that somehow mattered. "I wasn't abandoning you financially." "With stolen money?" I almost laughed. "You were going to pay child support with money you stole? That's your defense?" "Victoria, please." He reached across the table toward me. Rodriguez moved forward, but I held up a hand. "Don't touch me," I said quietly. "Don't ever touch me again." He pulled his hands back as if burned. "This will destroy me. I'll go to prison for years. My career, my life, everything." "Yes," I said simply. "You will, and you deserve every second of it." "How can you be so cold?" His voice rose, panic and anger mixing. "I loved you. We were together for 4 years. We made a child together. How can you just destroy me like this?" I stood up slowly, using the table for support, and looked down at him. "You destroyed yourself, Derek. I just documented it. The difference between us is that I actually loved you. I would have built a life with you. I would have stood by you. But you saw me as convenient until I wasn't. You saw our daughter as a burden you didn't want. You chose Rachel. You chose crime. You chose betrayal. Those were your choices." I placed my hand on my belly, feeling my daughter move. "I'm just making sure you face the consequences." "I could have been a father," he said desperately. I could have changed my mind, been there for her. No, I interrupted. You couldn't. Because in 3 weeks, when my daughter is born, you'll be in federal custody awaiting trial. And when she's old enough to ask about her father, I'll tell her the truth. That he was a criminal who chose theft and betrayal over family. That he's in prison where he belongs. Derek's face crumpled. Whether from genuine remorse or fear of prison, I didn't know and didn't care. Agent Rodriguez opened the door. Ms. Hart, I think that's enough. I nodded, starting toward the exit. At the door, I turned back one final time. Her name is Sophia, I said. Your daughter, the child you abandoned, her name is Sophia Grace Hart, and she deserves so much better than you. I walked out of the interrogation room with my head high, leaving Derek staring after me in devastation. Agent Mitchell was waiting in the hallway. That was necessary, I finished. He needed to know. He needed to understand what he threw away and what it cost him. His lawyer arrived 5 minutes ago. Once they confer, the reality is going to hit even harder. She paused. How are you feeling? Honestly, relieved, vindicated, and ready to focus on my daughter instead of her criminal father. We walked back toward the observation room where we could see Rachel Chen being interrogated in a different room. She was crying, mascara running down her face, insisting she hadn't known what Derek was doing with the money. She's lying, I said flatly. The joint accounts, the coordinated transfers, the communications. She knew every step of the way. We know, Agent Mitchell assured me. Her tears won't help her. The evidence is too strong. I watched Rachel for a moment longer. This woman who'd thought she was getting a successful man and millions in stolen money. Instead, she was getting federal charges and decades in prison. Thank you, I said to Agent Mitchell, for taking this seriously, for moving quickly, for everything. Thank you for bringing this to us. Cases like this, with evidence this solid, they're rare. Most financial crimes are much harder to prove. She smiled slightly. Though I have to say, I hope I never end up on your bad side. Then don't steal $18 million and abandon a pregnant woman, I said dryly. My phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Morrison. How are you feeling? Any contractions? Remember, we're inducing day after tomorrow if you don't go into labor naturally. Day after tomorrow. Friday. The day I'd become a mother. I should go, I told Agent Mitchell. I have a doctor's appointment, and then I need to finish preparing for the hospital. Of course. We'll be in touch as the case progresses. You'll need to provide formal testimony eventually, but we have everything we need for now. I drove home in a daze, the morning's events catching up with me. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. Derek and Rachel were in custody, facing decades in prison. The evidence was solid. Justice was being served. And in 2 days, I'd give birth to my daughter. A daughter who would grow up knowing her mother was strong enough to stand up to betrayal, smart enough to build a case that destroyed criminals, and brave enough to do it all while 8 months pregnant. That night, as I lay in bed feeling Sophia move, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness. That would come later. But peace. The knowledge that I'd protected my daughter from a man who would have disappointed her again and again. The knowledge that I'd used my skills and resources to ensure justice was served. My phone rang one final time that day. Thomas Bennett, my boss. Victoria, I just heard from Sterling's legal team. They're beyond impressed with your work on this case. They've asked specifically for you to handle the civil litigation once you return from maternity leave. He paused. They're also sending a rather substantial bonus for bringing this to their attention before the losses could grow larger. Consider it a baby gift. That's generous of them, I managed, still processing everything. You've earned it. Now get some rest. You have a big few days ahead of you. After he hung up, I pulled up my email and found the bonus notification. 6 figures. Enough to secure Sophia's future, fund her college education, ensure we'd be comfortable even as a single-parent household. Derek had thought he was securing his future by stealing millions. Instead, he'd destroyed his life and inadvertently secured his daughter's future through his own crimes. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. Friday morning arrived cold and clear. I checked into the hospital at 6 a.m., my overnight bag in one hand, my phone in the other. Jamie had promised to handle anything urgent at work. My mother was flying in that afternoon to meet her granddaughter. Everything was arranged. Dr. Morrison greeted me with a warm smile. Ready to meet your daughter? More than ready, I said honestly. The induction process began, a slow progression of medications and waiting. Hours passed in a blur of monitoring and contractions. Around 2 p.m., my mother arrived, taking my hand as the labor intensified. I'm so proud of you, she said softly. Not just for this, but for everything. What you did, what you're doing, your father would have been proud too. My father, who'd lost his business to corporate raiders, who'd taught me that sometimes the fight for justice was the only fight worth having. I hope so, I whispered. I know so. She squeezed my hand as another contraction peaked. Now let's meet this granddaughter of mine. Sophia Grace Hart was born at 7:42 p.m. on Friday, November 15th. 6 pounds, 8 ounces of perfect, healthy baby girl. Dr. Morrison placed her on my chest, and I felt everything else. The pain, the exhaustion, the stress of the past months fade into insignificance. Hello, baby girl, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I'm your mama. She opened her eyes, Derek's eyes, I noted with a pang, and looked at me as if she knew exactly who I was. You're perfect, I told her, and you're loved. So, so loved. My mother was crying too, her hand on my shoulder as she looked at her granddaughter. She's beautiful, Victoria, absolutely beautiful. Over the Salber, next few hours, as nurses came and went, as Sophia nursed and slept and woke to nurse again, I felt the final pieces of the past months settling into place. Derek was in federal custody. The evidence against him was insurmountable. My daughter was healthy and perfect, and I had proven, to myself most of all, that I was strong enough to handle whatever came next. My phone buzzed with an email from Agent Mitchell. Victoria, wanted to let you know that both Hart and Chen have been arraigned and denied bail. The evidence you provided was instrumental in the judge's decision. Flight risk due to offshore accounts and demonstrated willingness to engage in complex criminal activity. Trial date set for April. Congratulations on your daughter. You did good work on both fronts. Sarah. I read the email twice, then set my phone aside and looked down at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in my arms. Your father made a lot of bad choices, I told her softly, but one good thing came from all of it. You. And I promise you, I will spend every day making sure you know that you are wanted, loved, and valued. Everything he wasn't capable of giving, I will give you twice over. She stirred slightly, one tiny hand curling around my finger. We're going to be okay, I whispered. More than okay. We're going to be extraordinary. And as I sat there in the quiet hospital room, my daughter in my arms and justice served, I believed it. The weekend passed in a haze of visitors, feeding schedules, and learning the rhythms of new motherhood. My mother stayed with me in the hospital, helping with diaper changes and taking Sophia so I could sleep. Friends from work sent flowers and gifts. Even Thomas Bennett stopped by briefly, presenting Sophia with a ridiculously expensive teddy bear and promising my job would be waiting whenever I was ready. No one mentioned Derek. Everyone knew what had happened. The news had broken on Friday morning, and by Sunday, it was all over the legal community. Senior analyst at major investment firm arrested for multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. The headlines were everywhere, though they didn't mention my connection to the case yet. That would come later, during the trial. For now, I had a reprieve to focus on Sophia. We were discharged from the hospital on Sunday afternoon. My mother helped me get Sophia settled in her car seat, a task that seemed impossibly complex for something so routine. As we drove away from the hospital, I glanced back at my daughter sleeping peacefully. "Welcome home, baby girl," I whispered. The apartment looked different through a mother's eyes. The nursery I'd prepared so carefully now seemed both too large and too small for this tiny person who would fill it. I placed Sophia in her crib, watching her sleep, and felt the weight of responsibility settle over me like a blanket. I was solely responsible for this little life. No co-parent to share the burden. No partner to take the 3 a.m. feeding. Just me. And, somehow, that felt exactly right. My mother stayed for a week, teaching me the rhythms of infant care, making sure I ate and slept, taking night shifts so I could rest. On her last day, as she prepared to fly home, she pulled me aside. "You're going to be an extraordinary mother," she said. "You already are." "I'm terrified," I admitted. "What if I mess this up? What if I make the wrong choices?" "Then you'll learn and do better next time. That's what parenting is, a constant process of learning and adapting." She cupped my face in her hands. "But Victoria, I know you. You're methodical, thorough, and dedicated. The same skills that made you an excellent investigator will make you an excellent mother." After she left, the apartment felt too quiet. Just me and Sophia, the sounds of her breathing and the occasional cry filling the space. But it wasn't a bad quiet. It was a peaceful quiet, a clean slate. I established routines over the following weeks. Morning feedings, diaper changes, short walks around the neighborhood with Sophia in her stroller. I'd take her to the park and sit on benches, watching other families and marveling at how I'd join their ranks. Jamie visited twice a week, bringing work updates and coffee. Thomas had been true to his word. My position was secure, and the firm had even restructured some responsibilities to make my eventual return easier. "Sterling wants you on their ongoing case against Hart and Chen," Jamie mentioned during one visit, bouncing Sophia gently while I reviewed some documents. "They said specifically that they want the person who broke it open to see it through." "What's the timeline?" "Trial is set for April. That gives you almost 4 months to settle into motherhood before jumping back into full-time work." 4 months. Sophia would be 4 months old when I watched Derek and Rachel face trial for their crimes. Old enough that I could leave her with a nanny for court days. Old enough that I'd have my physical strength back. Old enough that I'd be ready to face them again. "I'll do it," I said. "You sure? It'll be intense. High-profile case, media attention. I'm sure. I started this. I'm going to finish it." The months between November and April passed in a blur of motherhood and preparation. Sophia grew and changed daily. First smile at 6 weeks. First laugh at 2 months. First attempts at rolling over approaching 3 months. I documented everything, partly for my own memories, partly as evidence of what Derek was missing. I also prepared for trial. Evening, after Sophia slept, I'd review evidence, prepare testimony, coordinate with the legal team. Thomas assigned 2 junior associates to help, and we built the civil case in parallel with the federal prosecution. The criminal trial would go first, Derek and Rachel facing federal charges. Then, regardless of outcome, Sterling would pursue civil damages through Bennett and Associates. Through me. Agent Mitchell kept me updated on the criminal case's progress. Derek's lawyer had tried multiple times to get evidence suppressed, arguing I'd obtained it illegally. Each time, the judge ruled in the prosecution's favor. Everything I'd found was admissible. Rachel had tried to cut a deal, offering to testify against Derek in exchange for reduced charges. The prosecution declined. They didn't need her testimony. They had mine and the mountain of documentation I'd provided. "They're both going down," Agent Mitchell told me during a video call in March. Sophia was napping, and I was going over final pre-trial preparations. Their lawyers know it. We know it. At this point, it's just a matter of how long the sentences will be. And you're confident about that? Victoria, I've been doing this for 12 years. I've never seen a cleaner case. The evidence you gathered would be impressive coming from a team of federal investigators. The fact that you did it alone, while pregnant, while dealing with personal betrayal? She shook her head. Honestly, it's remarkable. I had motivation, I said simply. That you did. She paused. Are you prepared for the defense to come after you? They're going to paint you as vindictive, as someone who manufactured evidence out of spite. Let them try. Every piece of evidence is backed by source documents. Every transaction traced to legitimate banking records. There's nothing manufactured about it. I know. I just want you to be ready for it to get ugly. Agent Mitchell, the father of my child, abandoned me when I was 8 months pregnant to run off with his accomplice in an $18 million fraud scheme. It's already ugly. The trial is just making it official. The trial began on April 7th, a Tuesday morning that dawned bright and unseasonably warm. I left Sophia with the nanny I'd carefully vetted, a retired pediatric nurse with impeccable references, and drove to the federal courthouse downtown. The media presence was substantial. Cameras and reporters lined the courthouse steps. I'd dressed professionally, but not ostentatiously. A well-tailored suit, minimal jewelry, my hair pulled back simply. I wanted to look competent, not vengeful. Assistant U.S. Attorney Thompson met me inside, guiding me past the media circus to a private conference room. "Big day," he said. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready for 5 months." "Good, because you're our star witness. Everything we've built is based on your investigation. The defense is going to try to discredit you, to make this seem like a personal vendetta. We need you to stay calm, factual, and unshakable." "I will." "And Victoria?" He met my eyes seriously. "Thank you for bringing this to us, for building this case, for seeing it through. This is going to be a career-defining prosecution for me, but it's also just the right thing. These people stole millions. They deserve what's coming." "Yes," I agreed. "They do." The courtroom was packed. I took my seat in the gallery, scanning the room. Derek sat at the defense table looking thinner than I remembered, his expensive suit unable to hide the toll the past 5 months had taken. Rachel sat at her own defense table. They'd been granted separate trials at their lawyer's request, but were being tried together for efficiency. Neither of them had seen me yet. When Derek finally turned, scanning the gallery, His eyes landed on me. The recognition, followed by something that might have been pain or might have been fear, flashed across his face. I held his gaze steadily, my expression neutral. I wasn't here for him. I was here for justice. The judge entered, and proceedings began. Opening statements laid out the case clinically: systematic theft, money laundering, conspiracy. The prosecution's opening was devastating, walking through the timeline of crimes with precision. The defense's opening tried to paint Derek and Rachel as victims of circumstance, caught in a complex financial situation they didn't fully understand. It was weak, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. I was called to testify on the second day. As I walked to the witness stand, I felt every eye in the courtroom on me. I was sworn in, state my name, confirmed my occupation. "Ms. Hart," Thompson began, "can you explain your relationship to the defendant, Derek Hart?" "He's the father of my daughter. We were in a relationship for 4 years until he ended it in November of last year." "And what led you to investigate Derek Hart's financial activities?" "I discovered evidence of an affair while attempting to understand changes in his behavior during my pregnancy. In the course of that investigation, I found financial irregularities that suggested criminal activity." "What kind of irregularities?" "Transfers from accounts associated with his employer, Sterling Investment Group, to shell companies and offshore holdings." The pattern matched money laundering schemes I'd encountered in previous investigations. "Ms. Hart, you're a senior investigator at Bennett & Associates, correct?" "Yes, I've been with the firm for 6 years, specializing in financial crimes and fraud cases." "So you have expertise in identifying and documenting financial crimes?" "Yes." "Can you walk us through what you found?" I spent the next 3 hours methodically laying out every piece of evidence. Account numbers, transaction dates, amounts transferred, connections between shell companies. I explained how I'd traced the money, how I'd verified the transfers, how I'd connected Derek and Rachel to the accounts. The jury listened intently. Several took notes. And through it all, Derek sat at his table, his face getting paler as the full extent of what I'd uncovered was laid bare for the court. When Thompson finished, Derek's lawyer approached for cross-examination. "Ms. Hart, isn't it true that you compiled this evidence after Mr. Hart ended your relationship?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that you were upset about this ending?" "I was disappointed by his choices, yes." "Disappointed enough to manufacture evidence against him?" "I didn't manufacture anything. Every piece of evidence comes from legitimate source documents, bank statements, corporate filings, transfer records. All of it is verifiable through independent sources. But you had access to his personal accounts, his passwords. I had access to nothing that wasn't available through legal channels or that wasn't already in my possession as his partner. I obtained bank records through subpoenas, corporate documents through public filings, and transaction records through legitimate investigative channels. Convenient that you discovered all of this only after he left you." "Actually," I said calmly, "the timing makes perfect sense. He became sloppy after he left, confident that I wouldn't notice or wouldn't care. He underestimated me." The lawyer's face tightened. "You wanted revenge." "I wanted justice. There's a difference. Derek Hart and Rachel Chen stole $18 million. That's not a personal matter. That's a crime. A crime you happened to discover right when you were most emotionally vulnerable and angry." I leaned forward slightly. "Counselor, I've spent 6 years building cases for some of the best lawyers in Chicago. I know what constitutes evidence and what doesn't. I know how to document crimes properly, and I know the difference between personal feelings and professional responsibility. I gestured to the binders of evidence on the prosecution's table. Everything in there is legitimate, verified, and supported by independent documentation. If you want to argue that I was motivated by anger, fine. But motivation doesn't change facts. The money was stolen. The accounts exist, the transfers happened, and your client's signature is on them. I saw several jurors nodding. The defense lawyer, recognizing he was losing ground, changed tactics. You used your professional resources to investigate a personal matter? I used my professional expertise to identify crimes and report them to the appropriate authorities. That's not abuse. That's responsibility. The cross-examination continued for another hour, but the lawyer gained no ground. Every attack on my credibility, I countered with facts. Every suggestion that I'd manufactured evidence, I refuted with verification methods. When I finally stepped down from the stand, I felt exhausted but vindicated. Thompson gave me a subtle nod. I'd done well. The trial continued for another week and a half. Financial experts testified about the money laundering schemes. Sterling's CFO testified about the losses and the impact on the company. FBI agents testified about their investigation and what they'd found. Derek and Rachel both declined to testify in their own defense, their lawyer's admission that they had no good explanation for the evidence. Closing arguments came on April 18th. Thompson was devastating, walking through the evidence methodically, showing how every piece connected to form an unbreakable chain of guilt. Derek Hart and Rachel Chen didn't just steal money, he concluded. They demonstrated calculated, prolonged criminal behavior. They created shell companies to hide their tracks. They moved money through multiple accounts to obscure its origins. They coordinated their efforts to maximize profits and minimize detection. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, sophisticated criminal enterprise. And thanks to the diligent work of Victoria Hart, we have documented every step of it. The defense's closing arguments tried to create doubt, to suggest the evidence was circumstantial or tainted by personal motivations. But it was clear even they knew it was hopeless. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. I was in the courthouse coffee shop when the verdict came down, Sophia asleep in her carrier against my chest. Agent Mitchell found me there. Guilty, she said simply. Every single count. I closed my eyes, feeling relief wash over me. Sentencing? Set for 6 weeks from now. Given the amounts involved and the sophistication of the scheme, prosecution is recommending 25 years for Hart, 20 for Chen. 25 years. Derek would be 57 when he got out. Sophia would be 25. She'd have her entire childhood, her adolescence, her early adulthood without him. Somehow, that seemed exactly right. Thank you, I told Agent Mitchell, for everything. Thank you, she countered. For trusting us with this, for building a case we could use, for seeing it through. You did good work, Victoria. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for a long time, just holding Sophia and processing what had happened. Justice had been served. The criminals were going to prison. My daughter would grow up without the shadow of her father's corruption. We were free. I gathered Sophia's things and headed toward the exit. As I passed through the courthouse lobby, I saw Derek being led out in handcuffs, his lawyer beside him. He saw me and stopped, causing the marshals to pause. "Victoria," he called out. "Please, can we talk?" I walked closer, adjusting Sophia in her carrier so he could see her clearly. She was awake now, her gray eyes, Derek's eyes, taking in the world around her. "This is Sophia," I said calmly. "Your daughter. She's almost 5 months old now. She smiles when I sing to her. She loves bath time. She's starting to grab at toys." I paused. "These are things you would know if you'd chosen to be a father instead of a criminal." "I made mistakes," Derek said desperately. "I know I did, but 25 years? Victoria, please. I could appeal, but I'd need help. I'd need support." "No." "What?" "No. I won't help you appeal. I won't support you. I won't do anything except raise our daughter to be better than you ever were." I looked at him steadily. "You made your choices, Derek. You chose Rachel. You chose crime. You chose to abandon your family. These consequences are yours to face." "She's my daughter too," he said, his voice breaking. "Don't I deserve a chance to know her?" "You had a chance. You threw it away." I turned to leave, then looked back. "Sophia will grow up knowing her father is in prison for fraud and embezzlement. She'll know you chose crime over family. She'll know you're exactly where you deserve to be. And hopefully, she'll learn from your mistakes and be nothing like you. Victoria, please." But I was already walking away, Sophia against my chest, leaving Derek and his choices behind us. Outside the courthouse, the spring air was warm and bright. Sophia made a small sound, and I looked down to see her staring up at me. "It's done, baby girl," I whispered. "It's really done. Now it's just you and me, and we're going to have an amazing life. I promise you." She grabbed at my finger, her tiny hand wrapping around it tightly, and I felt the last pieces of anger and hurt begin to dissolve. This was what mattered now. Not revenge, not justice even, though justice had been served. What mattered was this little person depending on me, this new life we were building together. I walked toward my car with my head high, my daughter secure in my arms, and the future spread out before us like a promise. The criminal trial was over. But there was still one more battle to fight. The civil trial began 6 weeks after Derek's criminal conviction, on a Monday morning in early June. Sophia was 6 months old now, sitting up on her own, babbling constantly, and sleeping through most nights. I'd returned to work part-time, bringing her to the office when needed, working from home when possible. Thomas Bennett had assigned me lead on Sterling Investment Group's civil case against Derek and Rachel. The goal was simple: recover every dollar they'd stolen, plus damages for the harm done to the company's reputation and operations. "This should be straightforward," Thomas told me during our prep meeting. "They've been convicted criminally. The evidence is established. We're just putting a price tag on their crimes now." But I knew better than to assume anything would be straightforward. Derek's family had money, old money, the kind that bought expensive lawyers and fought every battle on principle. They'd already posted his bond pending sentencing, and his mother had made it clear through various channels that she blamed me for destroying her son's life. The civil courtroom was smaller than the criminal one, less imposing, but no less significant. Sterling's legal team sat on one side, Bennett and Associates on the other. I was lead counsel, with 2 associates supporting me. Derek sat at the defense table with his new lawyer, his third since the arrest. This one was a specialist in civil litigation, brought in specifically to minimize the financial damages. He looked expensive and confident, the kind of lawyer who believed money could solve any problem. Rachel was absent. Her family had no money for civil litigation, And she'd already agreed to a settlement with Sterling, signing over what little assets she had in exchange for them not pursuing her further. Derek, however, was fighting. The judge entered, and proceedings began. I stood to make my opening statement. Your Honor, this case is about accountability. Derek Hart stole $18 million from Sterling Investment Group over 14 months. He was convicted of this crime in criminal court. Now we're here to ensure Sterling recovers what was taken, plus damages for the harm Mr. Hart caused to their business operations, their reputation, and their relationships with clients. I walk toward the jury box. The defense will try to claim Mr. Hart doesn't have the money to pay, that pursuing him is pointless. But Sterling Investment Group deserves restitution. Every employee who trusted Mr. Hart, every client who relied on Sterling's integrity, every shareholder who saw their stock value decline when this fraud was exposed, they all deserve to know that crimes have consequences beyond prison sentences. Derek's lawyer, Harrison Walsh, gave his opening next. As expected, he focused on Derek's inability to pay. My client made mistakes, terrible mistakes that he's paying for with 25 years of his life. But Sterling Investment Group is asking for $50 million in damages, money my client simply doesn't have and will never have. This isn't about justice. It's about punishment beyond what the criminal courts already imposed. The trial moved quickly. Much of the evidence was identical to the criminal trial, already established and verified. What was new was the damage assessment. Expert testimony about how much Sterling had lost, not just in stolen funds, but in client relationships, stock value, and operational disruption. I called witnesses systematically. Sterling's CFO testified about the $18 million in direct theft, plus another $12 million in lost business from clients who left after the scandal broke. Their head of investor relations testified about the 20% drop in stock price immediately following the arrest announcement. Their head of HR testified about the cost of restructuring Derek's department and implementing new financial controls. By the time I rested our case, we'd documented over $47 million in direct and indirect damages. Derek's defense was predictable. He was broke. The offshore accounts had been seized by the federal government. His personal assets, car, condo, investments, had been liquidated to pay legal fees. He had nothing left to give. Even if you award Sterling every dollar they're asking for, Walsh argued, my client cannot pay. He'll be in federal prison for the next 2 decades. Garnishing his future earnings, if he has any after prison, will yield perhaps a few $1,000s a year at most. This judgment would be symbolic only. I stood for rebuttal, Sophia's face fresh in my mind from that morning's goodbye. Your Honor, the defense is correct that Mr. Hart has limited ability to pay currently. But this judgment isn't just about immediate collection. It's about establishing a legal record of the full harm caused. It's about ensuring that if Mr. Hart ever does acquire assets, through inheritance, through future employment, through any means, Sterling has a legal claim to those assets. I paused. Moreover, this sends a message that financial crimes have comprehensive consequences. You can't steal millions, get caught, and simply declare bankruptcy to avoid restitution. The debt remains. It follows you. It defines your financial future forever. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was decisive. Sterling Investment Group was awarded $52 million in damages, the full amount we'd requested plus additional punitive damages. Derek's face went gray as the verdict was read. Walsh immediately began talking about appeals, but we both knew the truth. Derek Hart would carry this debt for the rest of his life. Every asset he ever acquired would be subject to seizure, every paycheck garnished, every inheritance claimed. He would never, ever escape what he'd done. After the verdict, I gathered my materials and headed for the exit. Derek's mother intercepted me in the hallway, her face twisted with anger. "You've destroyed my son," she hissed. "You vindictive, cruel woman. You couldn't accept that he didn't want you anymore, so you've dedicated yourself to ruining him." I looked at her calmly, my hand instinctively moving to my phone where I had photos of Sophia. "Mrs. Hart, your son stole $18 million. He betrayed his employer, his colleagues, and his family. I didn't destroy him. I simply documented what he'd already done to himself. He made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. But you've made sure he'll pay for them forever." "Yes," I said simply. "I have. Because some mistakes are crimes, and crimes have consequences." "What about Sophia?" she demanded. "What about my granddaughter? Are you going to keep her from me too?" The question caught me off guard. In the chaos of trials and evidence and verdicts, I hadn't considered Derek's extended family and their potential relationship with Sophia. "That depends," I said carefully, "on whether you can accept that your son is a criminal who's in prison because of his own choices. If you can have a relationship with Sophia that doesn't involve trying to rewrite history or paint me as the villain, then we can discuss visitation. If not, then no. I won't expose my daughter to people who can't accept reality." Mrs. Hart's face hardened. "You're punishing me for his choices." "No. I'm protecting my daughter from people who might teach her that crimes don't matter, that consequences are unfair, that the person who exposes wrongdoing is worse than the person who committed it." I met her eyes directly. "When Sophia is old enough, I'll tell her about her father honestly. I'll tell her he made terrible choices and is paying the price. If you want to be part of her life, you need to be able to support that truth, not undermine it." I walked away before she could respond, leaving the courthouse with relief flooding through me. It was over. Truly, finally over. Sentencing for the criminal conviction came 2 weeks later. I attended with Sophia, who was now sitting up and babbling constantly, drawing smiles from courthouse staff as we waited. Agent Mitchell found me before proceedings began. "Big day. How are you feeling?" "Ready to close this chapter," I admitted. "Ready to move forward. You've earned that. What you did, Victoria, building this case, seeing it through, maintaining your composure through everything. It's been remarkable." The courtroom filled. Derek was brought in wearing his prison jumpsuit, looking thinner and older than the man I'd known. His mother sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Rachel was sentenced first. Her lawyer made a plea for leniency based on her cooperation and lesser role in the scheme. The judge was unmoved. "Ms. Chen, you actively participated in stealing $18 million. You helped establish shell companies. You coordinated transfers. You enjoyed the proceeds of these crimes. Your cooperation came only after you were caught, which demonstrates self-interest rather than genuine remorse. I'm sentencing you to 20 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole after 15. Rachel collapsed into sobs as marshals led her away. Then it was Derek's turn. Walsh made an impassioned plea, citing Derek's previously clean record, his youth, his potential for rehabilitation. He talked about Sophia, about Derek's desire to eventually have a relationship with his daughter. My client has lost everything, Your Honor. His career, his freedom, his family. He's facing a judgment that'll haunt him financially for life. 25 years in prison seems excessive given these circumstances. The judge looked at Derek for a long moment. Mr. Hart, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence? Derek stood slowly. He glanced back at the gallery, his eyes finding me and Sophia. For a moment, something like regret flickered across his face. Your Honor, I know I made terrible mistakes. I betrayed people who trusted me. I hurt people I claimed to love. I threw away a future with my daughter for money that I'll never see, and a relationship that fell apart the moment we were arrested. His voice cracked. I wish I could take it back. I wish I could have been the man Victoria deserved, the father Sophia needs. But I can't. All I can do is accept the consequences and hope that someday, somehow, my daughter might understand that I wasn't always the person I became. The judge's expression didn't soften. Mr. Hart, I've reviewed your case extensively. The presentence report, the evidence from trial, the impact statements from Sterling's employees who lost their jobs when the company had to restructure after your crimes. What strikes me most is the calculated nature of your actions. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a single bad decision. This was 14 months of systematic theft, of deliberate deception, of choosing crime day after day after day. She paused, letting the words sink in. You stole $18 million. You corrupted a company's financial systems. You betrayed colleagues who trusted you. And you did it all while your partner was pregnant with your child, while you were preparing to become a father. The level of compartmentalization required for that demonstrates not just criminal behavior, but a fundamental disregard for other people. The federal sentencing guidelines recommend 20 to 25 years for crimes of this magnitude. The prosecution requested 25 years. Your defense argued for leniency. She looked at Derek directly. I'm sentencing you to 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole before serving 85% of your sentence. That means you will serve a minimum of 21 years and 3 months. Derek's mother gasped. Walsh closed his eyes, and Derek simply stood there, the reality settling over him like a shroud. Additionally, the judge continued, you will be required to make restitution to Sterling Investment Group in the full amount of their losses, plus damages as determined by the civil court. Your wages, if any, will be garnished for the rest of your life until this debt is paid. She brought her gavel down with a sharp crack. This court is adjourned. Marshals moved to lead Derek away. He looked back one more time at Sophia and me. I'm sorry, he mouthed. I nodded once, acknowledging his words without accepting them as sufficient. Then he was gone, and it was truly over. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered around. I'd been avoiding media throughout the trials, but Thomas had suggested this might be a good opportunity to tell my side publicly, to establish the narrative before Derek's family could paint me as vindictive. I adjusted Sophia in my carrier and approached the microphones. I'm Victoria Hart. Derek Hart is the father of my daughter Sophia, who's 6 months old today. When I discovered his crimes last November, I was 8 months pregnant and scared about what the future would hold. But I'm also a trained investigator who believes in justice and accountability. I looked directly at the cameras. Derek Hart stole $18 million. That's not a personal dispute. That's not a relationship issue. That's a crime that hurt hundreds of people. Employees, shareholders, clients. I documented those crimes and reported them to the appropriate authorities because it was the right thing to do, not because of our personal history. "Ms. Hart," a reporter called out, "some people are saying you destroyed a man's life out of revenge. How do you respond?" Derek destroyed his own life with his choices. I simply ensured those choices had consequences. And I'd do it again, because some things matter more than personal feelings. Justice matters. Accountability matters. Teaching my daughter that actions have consequences matters. Will you allow Derek to have a relationship with Sophia? That's up to Derek. If he wants to be part of her life from prison, to write letters, to video call when she's older, I won't prevent that. But I also won't pretend he's anything other than what he is. A convicted criminal serving 25 years for fraud and money laundering. Sophia deserves the truth. What's next for you? I smiled, looking down at Sophia, who was chewing on her fist contentedly. Next is raising my daughter, returning to my career and building a life. Derek made his choices. Now I'm making mine, and mine involve being the best mother I can be to this little girl. I stepped away from the microphones, walking toward my car with my head high. Behind me, I could hear reporters already framing the story. Single mother brings down multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Woman scorned becomes champion of justice. Senior analyst arrested by his own ex-girlfriend. Let them frame it however they wanted. I knew the truth. 3 months later, on a warm September afternoon, I was in my office at Bennett & Associates when an email arrived from Derek. The prison system had approved his access to limited email communication, and he'd put me on his approved contact list. The subject line read, "For Sophia." I almost deleted it without reading. Then I thought about my promise to let Sophia know her father if he wanted to be known, and I opened it. Victoria. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to read this, and I won't blame you if you delete it immediately, but I need to write it anyway. I've had 8 months in prison to think about what I did, to really sit with the magnitude of my choices. I didn't just steal money. I didn't just commit crimes. I threw away something precious, a family, a daughter, a future, for something worthless. I tell myself I did it because I felt trapped, because fatherhood scared me, because I met Rachel and saw an escape route. But the truth is simpler and worse. I did it because I'm a coward who panicked when life got real. You were 8 months pregnant with my child, and instead of facing the responsibility of fatherhood, I ran. Not just ran, but burned everything down on my way out. I chose crime over family. I chose deception over honesty. I chose myself over everyone and everything else. I know you documented my crimes. I know you built the case that put me here. And I know I should probably be angry about that, should blame you for ruining my life, like my mother does. But I can't. Because you didn't ruin my life. You held me accountable for ruining it myself. There's a guy in here, cell block D, who's doing 15 years for embezzlement. He has 3 kids he'll never see grow up. He tells me every day that the worst part isn't the prison time. It's knowing his kids will be adults when he gets out, strangers who might not want to know him. That's my future with Sophia. By the time I'm released, she'll be 26, an adult, a complete person I had no part in raising. I don't know what I'm asking for. Maybe just to tell you that I understand what I lost. I understand what I threw away. I understand that Sophia deserves better than me. And you're giving her that. If there's ever a time when you think it would be okay for me to write to Sophia, not now, obviously, she's just a baby. But maybe when she's older, when she can understand. I'd like to tell her I'm sorry, that I made terrible choices, that none of it was her fault. But that's up to you. You've earned the right to make every decision about her life. You're the one who stayed. You're the one raising her. You're the one who stepped up when I ran away. I hope she grows up to be like you. Strong, principled, brave enough to do what's right even when it's hard. Everything I wasn't. Derek. I read the email twice, then saved it to a folder labeled Sophia, Father. Someday, when she was old enough to ask about Derek, I'd let her read it. I'd let her decide what, if any, relationship she wanted with her incarcerated father. But that was for future Sophia to determine. Present Sophia was 9 months old, learning to crawl, laughing at everything, and completely unaware of the complicated history that led to her existence. I closed my laptop and checked the time. Almost 5 o'clock. Time to go home to my daughter. Jamie poked her head into my office. Heading out? Yeah. Sophia's with the nanny, but I don't like being away from her too long. You're a good mom, Victoria. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her, I corrected. She's the best thing that came from all of this. I packed up my briefcase, gathering files for tomorrow's client meeting. The Sterling case was officially closed, but there were always more cases, more clients, more work to be done. Life moved forward. At home, Sophia greeted me with squeals of delight, pulling herself up on the coffee table and bouncing excitedly. She was wearing the yellow dress my mother had sent, her dark hair starting to curl at the ends. Hi, baby girl. I scooped her up, breathing in her perfect baby smell. Did you have a good day? The nanny, Mrs. Chen, no relation to Rachel I'd checked, smiled warmly. She was wonderful, took both naps, ate all her food, and practiced crawling for almost an hour. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Same time tomorrow? Of course. See you both then. After she left, I settled onto the couch with Sophia, who immediately grabbed at my necklace, her favorite toy despite having dozens of actual toys scattered around the apartment. Guess what? I told her, as if she could understand. Your father wrote to me today. He says he's sorry. He says he hopes you grow up to be strong and brave. Sophia babbled something that might have been agreement, or might have been a demand for dinner. The thing is, I continued, bouncing her gently, he's right about one thing. I do hope you grow up strong and brave, but not like me specifically. Like yourself. Like the best version of whoever you're meant to be. I thought about the past year, the discovery, the investigation, the trials, the verdicts, the satisfaction of winning, of seeing justice served, of watching Derek face consequences for his crimes. But more than any of that, I thought about Sophia, about the way she smiled when she saw me, about her laugh when I tickled her feet, about the feeling of her falling asleep on my chest, completely trusting, completely safe. Derek had thrown this away. He'd chosen money and escape over this precious, perfect little person. And that was his loss, his tragedy, his burden to carry. My burden was lighter. Just Sophia and me, building a life together. You know what the best revenge is? I asked her, knowing she couldn't answer. It's not the trial victories, or the prison sentence, or the $50 million judgment. It's this. It's us. It's you being happy and healthy and loved. It's me raising you to be everything he'll never be. Honest, brave, accountable. Sophia grabbed my finger, squeezing with surprising strength for someone so small. That's right, I whispered. You and me, baby girl, we're going to be just fine. And we were. Better than fine. 3 years later, Sophia was a bright, energetic 3-year-old who loved books and dinosaurs and insisted on wearing her purple rain boots every day, regardless of weather. I'd made partner at Bennett and Associates. My mother visited monthly, spoiling Sophia shamelessly. We had a good life, a peaceful life, a life built on truth and honesty and love. Derek was still in prison, serving his sentence. He wrote occasionally, letters I saved for Sophia, never responding but never throwing away either. His mother had eventually reached out, asking to meet her granddaughter. We'd established a careful relationship with boundaries and honesty, but also with recognition that Sophia deserved to know her father's family. The $52 million judgment remained unpaid, would likely remain unpaid for decades, if not forever. But that was okay. It had never been about the money. It had been about accountability, about ensuring Derek couldn't escape the consequences of his choices. On the 3-year anniversary of Derek's arrest, I took Sophia to the park. She ran ahead of me toward the playground, her purple boots splashing through puddles from last night's rain. "Mama, push me!" she called from the swings. I pushed her, listening to her delighted shrieks, watching her hair fly back with each arc. "Higher, Mama, higher." "This is pretty high, sweetie. Much higher and you'll fly away." "I want to fly!" I laughed, pushing her higher, marveling at her fearlessness. At 3 years old, she was already braver than Derek had ever been. "Mama," she asked as the swing slowed, "do I have a daddy?" The question I'd been preparing for, the one I knew would come eventually. "Yes, sweetie, everyone has a daddy." "Where is mine?" "Your daddy made some bad choices a long time ago. He took things that weren't his, and now he's in a place called prison where people go when they break important rules." "Is he bad?" I thought carefully about my answer. He did bad things, but everyone is more complicated than just good or bad. Your daddy loves you, but he made choices that mean he can't be with you right now. Do you love my daddy? I loved who I thought he was, but love isn't enough if someone isn't honest and kind. That's an important lesson, Sophia. When you're older and you love someone, make sure they're honest and kind, not just exciting or fun. She nodded seriously, processing this in whatever way a 3-year-old mind processes complex emotional truths. "Mama?" "Yes, sweetie?" "I love you." "I love you too, Sophia. So much." She wiggled off the swing and ran toward the slide, already moving past heavy questions to the next adventure. I watched her play. This little person who existed because of betrayal and crime and heartbreak, who represented the best possible outcome from the worst situation. She was proof that even from destruction, something beautiful could grow. My phone buzzed with an email from Agent Mitchell. Saw in the news that Hart was denied early parole at his first hearing. Guess 25 years means 25 years. "How are you and Sophia doing?" I typed back, "We're doing great. She just asked about her father for the first time. Handled it with honesty. Thanks for checking in." Her response was immediate. "You're raising a strong kid. She's lucky to have you." I looked up from my phone to see Sophia hanging upside down from the monkey bars, her face red with exertion and delight. "Mama, look, I'm a bat." "I see you, my little bat. Be careful." "I'm always careful." She wasn't, particularly. She was bold and adventurous and convinced she could do anything. Everything Derek had been afraid to be. As the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I called Sophia over. "Time to go home, sweetie. Dinner and bath time." "Can we have mac and cheese?" "Sure. The good kind from the box, not the fancy kind you hate." "I don't hate it, Mama." I just don't prefer it. I laughed at her serious tone. Fair enough. No preferred mac and cheese for dinner. We walked home hand in hand, Sophia chattering about her day, about the big kids she'd watched on the playground, about the butterflies she'd almost caught. At home, while she ate her non-preferred mac and cheese, I opened my laptop and navigated to the folder labeled Sophia, Father. 23 emails from Derek now, spanning 3 years. Letters to a daughter he'd never met. Apologies to me I'd never acknowledged. Reflections from a man learning too late about consequences. I added a new document to the folder. Conversation. Age 3. First questions about father. I documented what Sophia had asked, how I'd answered, her reactions. Someday, when she was older, she'd want to know these details. She'd want to understand her own history. And I would give her that understanding, honestly and completely. No lies about her father being dead or disappeared. No painting him as a villain beyond his actual crimes. Just truth. He made terrible choices. He's paying for them, and she deserves better. "Mama, bath time!" Sophia called, already stripping off her clothes and leaving a trail toward the bathroom. "I'm coming, you little nudist." Later, after the bath and the stories and the bedtime routine, I stood in Sophia's doorway watching her sleep. Her room was filled with the detritus of childhood: stuffed animals, books, puzzles, the collection of rocks she insisted were treasures. Tomorrow she'd wake up and demand chocolate chip pancakes. She'd insist on wearing her purple boots. She'd ask me 17 questions before we even left the apartment. She'd be exhausting and delightful and exactly what my life needed. Derek had walked away from this, had thrown it away for money he'd never see, and a relationship that crumbled under the weight of consequences. That was his tragedy. Mine? Mine was walking toward it, choosing it, building it every single day. I closed Sophia's door quietly and walked to the living room, pouring myself a glass of wine and settling onto the couch. Tomorrow I had a deposition. Next week, a new fraud case starting. The work continued, the life continued, everything moved forward. My phone buzzed one last time. An email from Derek, his monthly letter. I didn't open it. Not tonight. Tonight was for me, for Sophia, for the life we'd built from the ashes of his betrayal. Tomorrow I'd read it, file it away, and continue forward. But tonight, I simply sat in the peaceful quiet of my home, listening to my daughter breathe in the next room, and counted my blessings. I'd started this journey 8 months pregnant, betrayed and alone, facing an uncertain future. I'd built a case that put criminals in prison. I'd given birth to a daughter who was the light of my life. I'd made partner at my firm. I'd established a peaceful, happy home. Derek had 22 more years in prison, a debt he'd never pay, and a daughter who knew him only through letters and stories. Justice had been served. Life had moved forward. And I had won. Not because Derek lost, but because Sophia and I had built something better than anything he could have given us. In the end, that was the only revenge that mattered. Living, well, loving deeply, and raising a daughter who would never make his mistakes. The story ends not with Derek's imprisonment, but with Sophia's laughter. Not with courtroom victories, but with kitchen table conversations. Not with revenge, but with redemption. Not his, but mine and Sophia's. We were free. We were happy. We were exactly where we needed to be. And that, finally, was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.